All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Vocal Jazz Academy Happy Hour. We are back for the month of July, and we're excited to see you all. Wow, we got lots of folks tonight. This is really, really cool. We have Christine Gooder with us. Ian Brekke is with us. We've got our special guest, Brian Dokko. And tonight we're going to talk about recording your choir. So we're going to continue down the technical path. Here we are. We're nestled in between, let's see, between Canada Day and the 4th of July. So we hope that you guys are all healthy and happy and staying safe. So let's kick this happy hour off right by doing a little toast. If you would, raise your glasses, my friends, and wishing you a healthy and happy holiday. Stay safe. Don't get overwhelmed. Let's toast.
Welcome, everybody. We are back to talk a little bit more tech tonight, and I have had the pleasure to work several times with Brian Dokko from Long Beach Poly, talking about tech stuff a lot. We text a lot about this stuff, and he helped build a school sound system for my program, and we talk about recording ideas a lot. And we've worked on some documents together, and also just a dear friend. So and kind of the resident tech guru for a lot of us that fields a lot of our questions. So we thought we could spotlight him and let him talk about some of the resources that he's been using in his program. Both of us have put out some virtual choir things for this spring, and neither of us approached it with a ton of experience. Neither of us considers ourselves experts in this, but we are both directors of ensembles and spent lots of hours on this. And so if we can pass along anything that we learned in the process, that's, of course, exactly what we want to do. That is a gigantic Yoda in the back of Martin's screen. It's just distracting me so much.
Baby Yoda.
So we are, yes, let's just do the spot. Perfect. So we're going to start off, we're going to talk about a few things, but we're going to start off talking about the program BandLab. And Brian actually started this program, using this program in his department before COVID happened. So I think it started in the fall, and he's got about a year under his belt with this. So we're going to discuss what it is, why it works, some of the drawbacks of using the program, and some of the quirks that go along with it. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian to dive in.
Thanks very much, Ian Brekke. So we did make a handout, and we'll make that available to everybody somehow. Our wonderful administrative ninja will somehow get that out to you. But if some of this stuff kind of goes by too quickly, don't worry, we're making a PDF available of it. That said, there's also, I did a YouTube video tutorial of BandLab that's a whole lot more in depth. So if you feel like something gets kind of glossed over, just feel free to catch that link at the end. The reason why I started using BandLab, a couple of reasons. Number one, it's free. It is entirely free. I've tried to look at all the fine print. There's nothing that hooks you onto a subscription later. It is entirely free. It's a cloud-based DAW, digital audio workstation. If you're unfamiliar with the term, that's just a term we use to describe the central piece of software used for recording and editing digital audio, in contrast to analog stuff. Some of the veterans. Yeah, jump in there.
So recording I don't know, 1980 or so, was all analog. And so we're talking about reel-to-reel recording. And if you wanted to edit something, you literally had to go in and splice and cut the tape and glue it together with a second take. And like that was editing at the time. Everything is digital now. And so everything has evolved to be highly manipulatable. You can kind of change whatever you want. It's also, you're able to work on projects and make changes, and they're not permanent. You can always undo things. So you have a lot more control than you used to. So that's why we stress, like, this is all about digital audio, and anything pre-1980, that's what actually happened. Anything that happens now, you're not sure if that's what happened in the room or not.
Moving on to a little bit more about BandLab. It can be used as your only recording software program. You could just do that, everything in there, mixing, balancing, panning, all of it. Or you can do what most of us do that have a little bit more experience with DAWs, which is to, excuse me, pull the stems or individual recordings into another program like Logic, Digital Performer, Pro Tools, Ableton, things like that. So in a sense, BandLab is kind of just the user interface that my students use, and then I'll pull it into Logic where I have a whole lot more control. You don't have to, though. You have the option of just doing everything in BandLab. It's really well suited for creating new music. There's a huge, massive free library of samples, loops. There's a drum machine. You can even create your own beats. My kids have really loved creating their own music. I mean, some of it just sounds really random, but the fact that they made it is just a huge selling point in terms of getting them to be creative. It works well both at recording ensemble parts as well as solo projects and assignments. So I've used the program to have groups either work as an entire vocal jazz choir of 16 kids. I've had it in quartets, and I've also used it for solo work. So kids are recording their own solo projects. We're going to jump right into a demo here. I'm going to share my screen of a project that's already loaded. So this is once you get past all the menus, which I described in my YouTube video, I'm just going to skip all that for now. You'll get to this. And this is, if you've have any experience with GarageBand or Logic or any of those DAWs, they all kind of look the same basic flavor. You've got some tracks here. You've got volume controls. You've got a pan knob. All your transport functions up here. Play, record. There's a metronome function. Again, I'm going to kind of skip over that because it's covered in the YouTube video. But this is the basic layout for a project I did with my vocal jazz group, so 16 singers. So I put in here, I combined all the bass, drums, piano into one track just so it didn't take up too much space. I actually have some MD cues, which I'll demonstrate in a second here. And all that is me yelling at the kids to do whatever. Like, we're at measure 14, or if I know a bass always gets lost at measure 78, Billy, come on, seriously? Right. You can put whatever you want in there. And then this is a scratch bounce of all the singers having something that can follow along with. Now, that can be provided by the instructor or by the students. And then this song is a feature for 2 of my singers, so I just included that as a reference. So just to, someone scream at me if you don't hear audio, but I'm just going to kind of jump around here. You can get a feel of what it's like.
Yeah, I can't hear it for whatever reason.
Can't hear it? Let me try this again. And oh, I should share computer sound, shouldn't I?
There he is.
Ah. How about now? Take 3, everybody. How about now? A2T. Here's the solo.
When my battle is over.
So what you hear there is the background track. I recorded a track kind of giving some commands, and then there's some solo. I'll jump around here a little bit. Here's the next part where I give some vocal direction.
Now it's time to be going home. Won't you sing me a song?
Oh, 19. So that's just me giving reference points so the kids don't get lost. There's a little bit more information happening over here.
Sing me a
Crescendo through. Build, build, build. 43. Then back it
sweet
down.
melody, carry me away.
Crescendo again. Fortissimo.
Let me rise up to the sky.
Bring it back down. Bring it back down. All the way down. So as you see there, I can't be there with the kids, so what I've tried to do is create an MD, music director track, that kind of simulates me being there to remind them. Another way I've described it is kind of making an oral or a vocal conducting chart. I think most of us are used to our hands conducting, but we can't really do that, at least not with this program. So I've just tried to include as much information as I could. So you'll see here, I have MD cues all throughout. And so the kids will just add a track right here, record their track right here. And then what I usually do is I pull that into, you'll see a function right up here. You can download tracks, also known as stems, and then I'll pull that into Logic. And what that allows me to do is just have a whole lot more control over editing, which is not required. It's just because I know Logic, it's just what I like to do.
So Doko, so from here, you build this, and then how do you get it to the students?
So what I do is, I'm not going to save any of this. I'm just going to exit out. So it's a little different with whether you're teaching students that are 18 or over, which I'm going to cover in a little bit. But in BandLab Personal, which is the main BandLab, you just invite collaborators right here. And I can invite anybody. I could invite Matt, Christine, Ian, anybody, and you instantly have access to modify the track. It's basically just a huge group project. On BandLab Education, it's a little bit different, which I'll cover in a second, but that's how you would invite people to add to your project. So as I said, I pull my stems out there, and then once I have them downloaded, and there's a little bit more detail on that inside my YouTube thing that I did, I will pull them into Logic. And this is the actual project. So you'll see there's way more tracks. And if you know Logic or any other DAW, there's just so much more control. So it's basically the same thing, though. So now I can add my effects, I can splice things with a little bit more accuracy, and as Ian is going to talk about later, I can correct things, which is not necessarily something that's easily done in BandLab. So this is me using two, but I just want to reiterate, you don't have to know how to use Logic, GarageBand, or anything. You could do everything in BandLab, it just lends a lot more control.
Brian, we had a good question from Paul here. He said, how do you keep collaborators from accidentally deleting project elements when sharing?
So if you're using BandLab Personal, meaning your students are over 18, again, I know if that's a little confusing, I will cover that in a moment. BandLab automatically creates what are called revisions. So if Ian comes into my project and he's just a punk kid that wants he wants to see the world burn, he just deletes all the tracks. I still have a reversion before that where I can just fall back to, and then I just kick Ian out of the project for being a punk.
Sounds right.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple of drawbacks or limitations about BandLab. It has a 12-track maximum, which doesn't really apply to me because I end up pulling stems down before there's 12. I just pull the tracks off and then delete them. There's a 6-minute song maximum. We'll talk about a workaround for that. It does require the Chrome browser, so if you're using anything else, you would just have to download the free browser, Google's Chrome browser. It can get a little laggy on older and slower computers, but that's probably not that different from any other software too. And then I talk about it in my YouTube, but there's one major strike against it in my mind, which is what's called revision history. To kind of sum up real quick, if two students are working on a project at the exact same time, only one of them is going to get their work saved. I think it's just a programming issue on their end. So what I've done as a workaround, as I explained in the video, is I just put schedules. I ask my section leaders to be in charge of assigning times when students can do their work, and then it kind of works around that. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in.
I'm going to jump in with a couple questions here,
Sure.
just before they get buried. Professor John Knudsen asks, can students do punches when they record their parts?
Yes.
And the second question is, anything in the way of pitch correction?
So the mobile format has a beta version of pitch correction, but the actual computer app, it doesn't make any sense to me why the computer app doesn't, but it's limited to just the mobile, whether you're using Android or Apple, it's limited to the mobile device. I don't know why, it really doesn't make any sense to me.
Strange.
But punching in is actually pretty intuitive. It's not that bad. You just drag and drop anything you didn't want. It's pretty simple. Okay, so education versus personal. And the whole reason we're talking about this difference is if you have students that are 18, younger than 18. So most of us in high school or junior high are going to have to worry about this. And the whole issue revolves around COPPA, which is Child Online Privacy Act. So technically, according to the terms and conditions of BandLab, you have to be 18 or over to sign up for a BandLab personal account. So for most of you teaching college, not a problem. Go with the personal, no big deal. But for those of us that are teaching high school, you will have to consider that bit of compliance. It is the exact same user interface. So that window I showed you of BandLab, it looks exactly the same. You still have resources to all the same samples. It's identical. Here are the differences. Once submitted, everything is assignment oriented for the educational platform. So once it's submitted, students can no longer edit their assignment, but you can always return the assignment. There is an option to return. So if a kid submits a project and like, shoot, I wasn't done, you just have to kick it back to them for them to have edit rights again. Collaboration on projects is restricted unless you configure student groups. Even then, students still can't work together on the project at the same time, as I mentioned before. So basically, BandLab education has just added a hurdle to group activity. The teacher only has to make one master project, and student work will automatically create new versions. So I can just create, I guess you could call it a template, and every time a student accesses the assignment, they create their own version of it, with the exception of group projects. That's an option in personal BandLab. It's called forking, but it's the default in education. It's actually your only option in education. I did mention revision history about having students log on at the same time, and it can create different versions. That's only on personal. On the educational, you just lose that data altogether. So it's really critical if you're going to use the educational platform to have a schedule.
Let's highlight that really quick because that is a major shortcoming of the education thing. And having discussed this last night, just the two of us, we came to the conclusion that we should just get in contact with this company and just say, look, this is a huge hang up for these reasons, for all the people that are going to be using this program for the fall. We will obviously post something if it changes, but for the time being, that's a huge hang up where if a kid is working on a recording and somebody else opens the project, one of those two is going to lose data. It's not going to turn into another revision. So you can't go back and manually just pull those stems. It's a problem. And obviously with the 18 plus thing, we can't recommend, just break the rules and go with the personal one. That is the one major thing where I think people would do it anyway, honestly, just to get around that issue. Because trying to keep track of a detailed schedule like that sucks. That's going to be really hard.
Yeah, so it's I just wish there was some sort of check-in content management system where if Ian logged into the file, it would just say, this file is temporarily unavailable, someone else is using it. But maybe if Ian and I both send strongly worded emails, they'll change their entire software for us. We'll see.
Obviously.
So my conclusions of education versus personal is that education is geared towards, more geared towards individual work, though group collaboration is definitely possible. It just takes a little bit more, a couple more steps. And the personal is way more flexible, and in my humble opinion, it's easier. But if you do have students that are under 18 to comply with COPA, the educational version is still very capable. It's just, there's just a few more hiccups. Or as Ian said, just throw caution to the wind. And there's some people that are just having their parents sign them in, which as far as I'm concerned, we're, complying with the law.
You want to field some questions?
Sure.
Okay, we have a question via Facebook from Lauren Kinnan. Can this be done as an actual class time activity? Like, can people mute themselves and record themselves? Do you see it being added in real time?
Yes, definitely. The only issue with that comes isolation. Like if Ian and I are sitting right next to each other, 6 feet apart, I'm going to pick up some of whatever he's doing, unless you're using virtual instruments. And you could totally do that in next to each other. But yeah, I actually have used this in class, real time, as part of my instruction.
We have another one from Andreas here. If I imagine this like a Google document that several people can edit in real time, are there any issues when several students work on the BandLab project simultaneously? I think we kind of...
Yeah, so that is the one major complaint. I love BandLab, especially because it's free, but that is the one hang up that I've had to deal with. Just the fact that if you've ever done Google Docs, you can see 3 or 4 people typing on the document at once, and it's totally fine. But for some reason, the way they've coded their software, it does limit access to one person at a time. And again, just to stress that again, in personal, it turns into a headache in terms of you still get 2 people's data. They just end up on 2 revisions. But on the education, one of them gets eliminated because there is no revision history in the educational platform.
And that would, of course, be the next level. Like if they did a $5 a month subscription and everybody could jump in and be recording simultaneously and there was enough horsepower on their servers to handle all of that, that would be amazing.
Oh, I would totally pay more than $5 a month for that. I mean, this service to me is, I don't want to say priceless, but in terms of virtual distance learning, I don't know what else I would do. I'm not going to ask all my students to buy a $200 piece of software called Logic, or, I don't know how it's free. I think the Russians are collecting data, maybe. I don't know what it is.
Mark asks, if all students generate a new project in the education version, don't they all have a unique project to submit so the two at once is an issue?
Yes, that's correct. So if you're not assigning a master file and the kids are just creating their own, yes, there's no revision history to worry about.
Awesome. Okay, and Gao and John asked about importing into Pro Tools. I think we can both kind of field that, but basically what this is creating is the raw files for each individual student, and we're still looking at Dokko's screen right now, just the individual tracks for each person. All of those can be soloed or muted or whatever, like a lot of DAWs, but those all came from individual BandLab submissions.
Yeah,
And
correct. So to clarify right up here, all these instrumental tracks, I had a buddy of mine, Peter Dyer, he just created all these as individual tracks, and everything you see down here, these are all tracks created on BandLab that I downloaded and imported into Logic.
could you do that for one of the solos real quick? Could you
Sure.
pull the project back up?
So let's just assume Kid X has recorded a part. Oh, let's just do it now, shall we? Okay, I'm going to create a track here. Is this assigned? Yes, it is. Oh, you stupid metronome. Wah, 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 wah. Okay, that's good enough. So you see my wonderful singing right here. It's really beautiful. I should not be sharing with all of you this because, you know, I'm going to make some money on this. Just kidding. Okay, so say someone's recorded an entire track. I'm not going to do that for time. You go here to File, Download Tracks. Oh, please, baby Jesus, don't let this take forever. Sometimes this process takes a while, so... Oh, good. It's
Go ahead and refill your drinks,
I
everyone.
know, right? Come on, baby. You know a good joke, Ian, for now?
Actually did. That's brilliant. I love you, Christine.
All right, come on, come on, come on, come on. Oh, come on. Are you really hanging at 98%? You are Satan. Come on. Okay, I'm just going to talk as if it showed up. You would see another screen here that has every track listed and a little download button. You would download that, and it goes to wherever... Okay, that's not helpful. It would go to wherever you have your downloads, and then it does come in a gibberish file form. It's like XX253 number, whatever. So I strongly suggest, also covered in the video, to rename those stems immediately. Otherwise, you won't be able to keep track of what's what. I wonder why I did that. Let me try again. No, this is useless
Hey,
to me.
let's field this question here, Brian. Amy Stewart asked, when they're recording in BandLab, they're not hearing other students' recordings. I'd like to see them be able to sing with each other in some way. So is that possible?
Yeah, so if you have, say, Ian goes first, 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock, I go next, 10 to 11, you can definitely hear who's done project or who's done the recordings before you. And then if you were the first one to record, you can just go back later and hear what everybody else did. And I've actually had kids that have been the first one, hated their take because they had no reference point, and gone back and been the last one after having heard everybody.
And that's not uncommon if you're going to multi-track an arrangement or something. Like you'll do a bass take and then record a bunch of other parts and then go back, listen to your bass take and go, actually, that was the worst one now, and replace it. So a kid could go first and then have a chance to replace it, but be the guide because they're the section leader or something like that.
Sure, sure. So it's taken a little bit of time to process my awesomeness right here. I think it's just too much good singing, so it's slowing down right here. That's a joke, everybody, by the way. I'm sorry. So it would look like this. So you download the part, it would go to your download directory, and you literally can drag and drop into Logic. So I would just find whatever, like I'm on a Mac, so I would find the file on Finder, drag it in, you know, somewhere down here, and it would just create a new track automatically. I think that answers that question, yes?
Yeah, absolutely. And Christine pointed out, recommend having your sopranos go first for style and phrasing.
Yeah. I always suggest have your strongest, whoever it is anyway, go first.
We recommend having Christine's soprano go first,
Yeah,
actually.
whenever possible, please do Christine's track first in all of your virtual choirs coming up for this fall.
You guys are hilarious. Thanks.
Okay, shall we move on to the pro tips? Unless there's any more questions.
This will lead us in pretty nicely here. There's a question. Do you recommend that they just use their phone mics or earbud mics for recording in BandLab?
So Ian and I are going to share some links at the end of a couple of YouTubes of both his choir, my choir, and with the exception of one kid in my group and how many in yours? One kid in yours?
Yes.
Everybody used iPhones or smartphones. Nobody used external microphones. So you can get very good quality results if, and the operative word is if, you train your students to use them properly. So let's just jump into that right now, shall we? So just a couple of tips to wrap up. I like to use scratch tracks so that the kids hear my voice kind of leading them, giving them some instruction. It's really helpful, especially with if you have tempo changes. You can go 1 and 2 and 3 E and 4 E and you can do that audibly, and they can hear it even though they can't see you. They can still follow along and make that subdivision. As I just said, I always start with my stronger singers when I'm editing. This is a controversial statement, but we're going to say it anyway. Don't be afraid to lower volumes, mute, or completely delete tracks. I know there's a lot of like, oh, I don't want to mute Johnny because Johnny works hard, but if Johnny didn't sing the right notes, sorry, just pretend you're there. So I know it sounds harsh, but in terms of time, saving time as a director, you just got to learn to cut things loose. That's my humble opinion.
Yes.
And then one last thing on this before we talk about the recording tips. For some applications, I've done separate audio recordings and video recordings. I know some people are like, oh, that's like lip syncing. It's like, well, come on, are we in the classroom? This is such a less than ideal situation. I say just do what you got to do. So my kids record their audio on BandLab, and then if I'm doing a virtual choir setting, then they'll do a video of them singing along with the recording, but then I just chuck that audio.
Hey, Brian.
Yes, ma'am.
Miss.
Yes, miss.
Thank you. I have a question about the tracks that Peter Dyer did for you. Did he play everything, or did he do some virtual instrument tracks? How did he do that?
He did piano, organ, Wurlitzer, bass, drums, and a little bit of percussion. So he just did all those separately so I could have individual volume control. And we just did it to a click. So this project's at 68, quarter note equals 68.
Did he actually record the instruments though, or did he do MIDI?
Oh, everything was virtual. He did it. He took a keyboard with him on a vacation up to his folks' place up in Oregon and just did everything remotely.
Right. So I was going to say, it is possible if you're worried about recording band to get really great tracks that are MIDI that sound live. I know people who use that program at a really high level, and it doesn't cost that much money. So just a thought.
There's a couple people talking about Soundtrap in the chat here as well. This is a competitor, and it's very similar in what it does. Brian and I have more familiarity with BandLab, so that's what we're talking about today. But absolutely, if Soundtrap works better for whatever reason, then go with that. Why not? Do what works for you. And Angie, we'd love to hear more from you on that. If you had more feedback on that, that might be something you could just post in the Facebook group, and we would love just a little review of that.
And everybody's going to have their own preferences for layout and features. So we're using BandLab as the context for this, but whatever software you can find, we totally encourage you to dive totally into it.
Matt Folker.
Well, it's the bottom of the hour. You know what that's time for, folks. If you've been coming to these happy hours, you know that the bottom of the hour means it's time for bottoms up. So thanks all for being here. Cheers.
I'm not supposed to finish this, am I? Actual bottoms up?
Actual bottoms up, my friend.
All right.
That's how we do it. Have we mentioned too that there's apps for this, and can you record in your phone and desktop and a Chrome? Somebody asked about Chromebook, right?
Yeah, that's all. We're going to talk about that pretty quickly here, actually. Yeah. So, and if there's any question we don't cover, please feel free to either mention it when we have a question moment for questions, or even in the Facebook, or just friend Ian or I, and we'll get your question. So Ian, you want to talk about recording tips for students?
Sure. I got your text, and I don't have earbuds handy,
I'll
actually.
grab them.
Okay. So we just, in doing this, uh, we had to send out instructions to the things that would help them get a smooth recording. Frankly, we had a lot of submissions early on that had some pretty major issues, and so just providing detailed instructions really saved us a lot of time and stress on the back end. We also used some of the instructions just from the Eric Whitaker virtual choirs as reference and kind of built our own from that. So I think the first thing that Brian was going to demo here was just earbud technique and talking about that with the students.
So this is, I think everyone's seen this. It's the freebie head earbuds that come with an iPhone. It's quite similar with a lot of them. I noticed a lot of kids started trying to do their recordings like this, and it just ended up like they were screaming in my ears. Tracks were clipped, and just everything sounded just really intense. So I always encourage the students just to experiment with the sound, and one of the things we wanted to point out is encourage your students to listen to the recordings before they submit it, because a lot of kids just do the recording and just send it to you, and then it's either super clipped or it sounds like they're 14 miles from their microphone. And it would have been simple if they just listened to it. They would have, any musician would have been able to hear that it's just unusable. Redo the take.
I'm going to interject. Where's Last Lullaby from?
Last Lullaby was a commission, actually. Jamie Dyer wrote that for me. She did the arrangement for me.
Katie Hickson was asking about it. She loved it.
Ah.
Uh,
I'm happy
yeah,
to share it.
So earbud technique. This is a thing now, right? Where the first day we all set up sound in the classroom, you have to do microphone technique. So you do have to actually demo earbud technique, and don't hold it up like this. Try to find a natural volume. Try to find a natural sound to it, and then just be consistent. So we've had some students that are moving too much, and it sounds terrible, and it's much harder to mix that way too. So whatever they settle on, just be consistent with that.
And a lot of what my angle is I want to meet the kids where they're at and not have them buy extra stuff or invest in extra things wherever possible. So this thing that comes free, or I've seen these on Amazon for like a couple of bucks that have some sort of mic. You can actually get very, very, very decent results.
Yeah. So just some quick hit items here. Clean up your background. It seems so obvious, but we've seen some amazing things in the backgrounds of our students' videos.
Terrible things too.
Don't wear ridiculous clothing. Like, be yourself, but maybe not super loud branded stuff. And also, like, if you're going to watch this video in 30 years, you're going to be okay with what you're wearing. We recommend people face good lighting, face a window. That's the cheapest option often. One thing that came up a lot was remember to turn recording devices onto a do not disturb mode. So we had a lot of students get halfway through a great take and then get a call or a text. No, let's be honest, none of them got a call, but they got a text or something, and it interrupted their take. We recommended don't hold your video device, but actually mount it or lean it against something stable. It looks bad when you get the Brady Bunch windows all up all over the place and somebody's camera is super shaky. So just mount that somewhere. And then also we did landscape mode for our videos, but some people choose portrait mode. If you're going to go portrait, fine. Just be consistent. Again, it'll make the video editing much easier. Angie said a music stand works for the phone. Perfect.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Ryan, you want to talk about monitoring?
Sure. The one drawback of these these headphones is that they don't isolate. So if they have these things cranked up, I don't know if any of your students just are like certifiably deaf in terms of the volumes that they crank these things up to. It's amazing. I hear them from like 100 feet away. But caution your students that if they have these cranked too loud, that it is going to spill over into their recording.
Yeah, and one that circles back to listen to it before you submit it. Two, We also do this for our guide tracks when we make them, is that we just hard pan their part to one ear or the other. And so they can mentally focus in on, okay, I'm really just the left ear, and that'll actually isolate their part a little bit more. They'll be able to listen to it at a lower volume. Also, when you're creating a guide track, you need to be mindful, before you even send it out, you need to be mindful about the click volume in relation to the guide track itself. So if you're not doing that, they're not going to be able to hear themselves because the click is going to be too loud or whatever, and they can't get their part up loud enough.
Click volume. Yeah, totally. Any questions at this point, Ian?
No, I just see Roger Emerson joining, so we'll let him in.
Hey, Roger. I just have 3 questions that I get kind of asked frequently as far as BandLab goes. What if I have a song longer than 6 minutes? Ian and I joked, we'll pick a different song. But the real solution is...
Faster.
I know, right? Do it. Cut time. We've just used one project and it just kind of dovetails with a second project. So you just have some overlap and then you just merge them. That does require as some sort of external audio, but we talk about that later. I see Gao asking about video. Do you want to touch on that now or later?
We can talk about it. This actually came from some of the recording tips things. There are kind of 2 versions of the virtual choir. One is to track all the audio separately and mix it and then send it back out to the students and have them record their video based on that. So you're actually singing along, but it is not the same take, and you can get it pretty close. But that's one option. The other option would be to record the audio and the video together. Hypothetically, that's possible on one device. It's much harder. If you have 2 devices, it's much easier to do audio and video. The trick is audio, video, and a guide track. Those kind of the 3 sources. That's where it gets tricky. One of the free resources that we recommend, sorry, not free, very cheap, is an app called Mideo, M-I-D-E-O, and that allows you to record a video to a phone for Android or for iPhone with a background track playing. So I literally saw it advertised for people filming, like, I guess it must be TikTok videos or something of weightlifting videos, and they wanted background music to pump them up or something. But like, that's not what we're going to use it for. We're going to use it for guide tracks, and it allows students to do it on one device. But if you have an actual computer, then of course you can have audio and video recording open together. So that's kind of your choice, how you want to approach that if you choose to do this. The turnaround time for doing audio and video separately will inherently be longer, probably, just by its nature.
Yeah, it definitely depends on what your time frame is and what your standard of the project is.
Yes.
A couple other questions that I got a lot was, there's a practical concern, and I got this from my students. When I record, my audio doesn't seem to line up. There's a couple things with that. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. There's a latency test you can do. So under settings, you'll see latency test. So a lot of times the computer just needs to adjust with whatever your input source is. So if you have students or yourself complaining, hey, I record it, it feels like I'm in time, I feel like I have good time, but then it doesn't sound like it's in time, it might be that. The other thing is I always really discourage, wherever possible, avoid Bluetooth or wireless headphones, because that inherently will have some lag as well. But most of the things can be solved with this latency test. And it doesn't require any skill. You just hold up the earphones or earbuds or whatever to your microphone, and it automatically syncs itself up. Here's a really common question. Can I use BandLab on a Chromebook? Because most school sites have a lot of Chromebooks at their disposal. The bad news is not really. I've tried it, and you can get maybe a track or 2, and then it starts getting really laggy. Just Chromebooks are just not meant for processing. They're meant for like word processing and maybe some, casual web browsing, but don't depend on Chromebooks for trying to do BandLab. It just doesn't have the horsepower.
Sorry, I'm just messing with stuff over here.
It's all good. Um, so we wanted to offer something for those of you that are a little bit more comfortable with dedicated DAWs like Logic or whatever. So Ian's going to run through with us a couple of demos with cleaning up tracks, and this all circulates around or revolves around students just using iPhones or Androids or whatever, just not having to buy extra stuff.
Yeah, and I want to a couple quick hitter things I'm noticing in our notes that we didn't get to. One huge advantage to this BandLab thing is that you could hypothetically craft your entire semester around you never having to mix anything. You could make it part of the student curriculum of you have to record a trio thing, and then everybody has to do their own separate balancing and mixing, and each of you is going to submit that to me. So that takes a lot of the post-production off of your plate. I know just from doing one virtual choir, there's no way I could do it during the school year. It's so much flippin' work that like it's not possible with everything else going on. So I do really like that they could dig into that. They could learn a new thing. And in our experience, they've been like hungry for that because they finally have some control and they wanna dig into mixing their own tracks a little bit. So we really like that. Random thing. Some students have submitted tracks to us that they have already attempted to mix, like they've added their own reverb or something, and we always have to stress, like, record dry tracks, please, and submit those to us because it doesn't fit with all the other voices. And we already mentioned make sure students listen to their own recordings. So let's do a little bit of audio cleanup stuff. Can you all hear that crying in the background? Um, so I'm going to share my screen. I did I did a virtual choir on the song "Baby Mine," and this was an a cappella ballad. And I would not have picked an a cappella ballad if it wasn't a dedication to our new baby and my wife, basically. So the students had already learned it, and then when we went into quarantine, this was the one that they really wanted to track and to share with her because they were going to surprise her with it at the concert. So I was super touched by that, and it was of course more work to do all the phrasing and stuff, but we did record it, and so they sent in all their individual stems after I had created guide tracks for them, pretty similar to what Dokko already showed you guys. And then I put them all together and I did some basic balancing of the tracks, and immediately I could tell that we had a lot of iPhone and earbud quality recordings. Yes, in audio quality, but also just in like background noise, just in a bunch of stuff back there. And when you stack 14 of them on top of each other, even if they're quiet, all of a sudden it's super loud, and that like hiss is just maddening. So they do have programs for that now, and there is one that I'm going to show right now that the reason it's worth our time is that it does sort of have a magic wand function where you can hit one button and it does a bunch of work for you. You can go into all the settings and mess around with it, but there is like a quick fix option that is most relevant to us. And if I were to recommend one purchase for instructors for the fall, honestly, I think it would be that, just to allow the teachers to clean up these tracks. And you don't have to rely so much on does the student have a good microphone or can they afford a microphone when you have a little bit more control on your end. So let's just take a look at it really quick. Everybody can see that okay? Mm-hmm. So this is a program called Isotope, and this is their RX7 bundle. So I've already imported one of my tenor tracks into this, and I picked this one because he clearly had like the AC running in the background, and it was really disruptive to the overall mix. So I guess I'll just play some of it. So even right away at the beginning, oops. We've got that shh in the background of that. Maybe hard to hear over Zoom, but it's clearly there. So you've got all this stuff in here that you could mess with. This is what we're interested in right here, this repair assistant. I click into this, I click repair assistant, and the step that I'm skipping here, just for time's sake, is it analyzes the entire track, and it analyzes for all of these things. In this case, it didn't detect like a major problem, so it just created some basic cleanup options. And then it gives me three different versions of a repaired track that I can sample from. So here's the original. Here's option A. Not super different. That got rid of quite a bit of it.
It's really hard to hear over Zoom, but it does definitely work.
Okay. B was definitely the best option there. I have way less shh in the background of that. So I'm going to select B, and I'm actually going to just select this option right here. And this is going to create, again, within it, it's going to create 3 options just in the intensity level of this. As it takes its time. Now I've got kind of the standard, I've got less intense, and I've got more intense. And I can change it as I'm listening. Just looping a short section here. So if I go all the way over here, it's actually like squashing the quality of the voice too much. That's too much for me. That's got a little bit too much background hiss, so I'm going to leave it right there. If I want to see what it's doing, I can open this as a module chain, and it is automatically added a D-click, and then the thing that's doing most of the work here is the spectral D-noise, and this is trying to get the background hiss out of there. And you can see what it's doing. You can click into it. You can change stuff if you want to, or you can just wave your magic wand and be done with it. And that's that. So then I just hit render, and it runs through my track, and it's going to apply this plugin. So when this is done, my background noise is hypothetically gone. And that's really all it takes, guys. I'm not watching the chat, sorry.
I'm on it.
Is there anything on there?
We're good.
Cool.
The question was, is this a tool within BandLab or a separate tool? It's actually, you want to talk about that, Ian? If it's...
Yeah, it is not within BandLab. This is a separate program. It's a standalone product. It also works as a plugin with a lot of different DAWs, like a standalone DAW that's not web-based. So you can use it as a plugin for Logic, like I have. But this is what I'm showing right now is just the standalone program. And this version of it is $200. They also have a version that I haven't tried called RX Elements, and that's about $65. And it's specifically advertised for like at-home recordings and cleaning those up. So I haven't tried it, but for one product that you're going to purchase that applies to all of your students, it's pretty good, honestly. So that's it. This is done. I've cleaned up my background hiss. And then from there, I would just export that track. And once it's exported, then I could just move it into Logic at that point. That's how it works.
It's really hard to hear on Zoom, but I can attest, having heard some edits from Ian and from Sean Fitzpatrick, it does amazing work. And I love the fact that it's a one-button thing.
Let me see if that fixed the problem. Is that better?
Yeah.
So again, remember to share your computer sound, because otherwise this is useless to all of them. Okay. Yes, it really it does great work, and it cleaned up just so many background clicks and AC noises for us. A lot of stuff that you sort of think like, I'm never going to be able to get around this problem, but that that improved a lot of our audio quality all around. So so that was the bulk of cleaning up the just base audio. It really is about quality source content. Like the better source content you can get, the less work you have to do. So if you can really stress to your students, record in a quiet environment, record in a coat closet, record in some place that is naturally deadened a little bit to get that dry take. That's going to save you a lot of time and energy. The other thing that I just wanted to be upfront about, and I'm just going to share this real quick. So this is the session that we recorded here.
Baby mine, don't you cry. Baby mine, dry your eye.
Stop it right there. That's all you get.
No more.
It's on YouTube if you want to check it out. I want to be super upfront about how when I first imported all of these tracks, they lined up, but they couldn't hear each other. And so things like consonants and cutoffs and breaths, all the things that you would rehearse and all the things that the students would use their ears to correct, they didn't have that advantage. So things like timing edits and things like small pitch edits where somebody's singing 5 cents sharp and another person is singing the same part 5 cents flat. Yes, you could put out a version that's totally unedited, and it's more accurate to what happened. It's also probably not what your group actually sounded like when you left off in March, because they're just working at a disadvantage of not being able to hear each other, even with the guide tracks. So everybody kind of has to follow their own compass on that. It's not a replacement for live stuff, and we can't trust it in the same way that we can live stuff. The reality, though, is that anything that's been recorded digitally, you can't fully trust it. Like, all of these tricks are used in the studio all the time. So where do we draw the line? And I think everybody has a different answer to that. But especially things like timing edits, that was a really important thing that took 10, 15 hours just to get everybody's parts to line up accordingly. There is a feature in Logic called Flex Time that you can do with that. I use the program Melodyne. It's a separate plugin to this. It does pitch correction. It also does timing edits really easily. I'm just going to quick show you the power of Melodyne because it's kind of crazy.
Wrong.
Wrong?
It's just so wrong.
It's what it can do. So look, this is the opening solo right here.
Baby mine, don't you cry.
Cool. So I'm just going to start with some timing edits here. Cool. And let's squash that note. Awesome.
Baby mine, don't you cry.
Okay, I wouldn't do that, but I can, right? So if Danielle sang this just a little long, I could just correct it ever so slightly like that.
Baby mine.
And then, of course, they would line up with the rest of the parts. You can also take this way too far, and you can T-paint it, and you can just flatten everything. And this
Oh, yes.
will overdo it.
Baby mine, don't you cry. Baby mine, dry your eyes.
Which is so painful, right? Like, it's just so painful to listen to that. And frankly, when you hear that, you just saw how easy that was. Just select everything and just flatten it out. To me, when I hear that now, I think like, man, that's so lazy. Like, this program is so powerful, and all you did is just select everything and just boom, just flatten it out. Like, you could be so much more nuanced about this and try to keep it way more human. And then, of course, you do also just have the
Keep it.
the ability. Danielle's gonna kill me.
Baby mine, don't you
Oh,
cry.
love it.
That's better. It is.
You could make a mean improv solo from.
Or 12-tone row.
Yeah. I have one addition to make with what Ian's offering here. Meltdown, my best friend, right? Um, but as far as guide tracks, if you're nervous or overwhelmed about creating a guide track, that can also be done. There are people who do these things. If you have the money in your budget and you know somebody or a friend of a friend, and you don't know how to create your own guide track, reach out to one of us, and we're happy to put you in touch with people or help you out.
Yes. So we're nearing the end of our time here. We do have a handout from today where we put together a bunch of resources, a bunch that are free. So BandLab, of course, but talking about just some DAWs and some recording tips and tricks that are totally free. And then just a basic list of recording resources that we can easily recommend that are on the affordable side of that frankly kind of expensive world, but some of the affordable options that we can recommend to y'all. So are there any questions that we can help with?
To jump in real quick, we also, in that handout, we put a couple of links, like I said, of the recordings that Ian's group and my group did, just to show you that, you can get pretty good results with just iPhones, with just Androids or whatever it is that your students have. You don't need a lot of gear for it. John Knudsen raised his hand.
You saw that. Cool. I'm rusty at the mute button now that it's summer. Ian, is it really could you just show me really quick how you grab the plugin and Logic? How do you select a Melodyne plugin for a track? Is that easy to demo or not really?
Yeah, it's extremely easy. So here's I have to be able to see what you see. Here's my mixer view. In Logic, just all of these, any additional plugins show up down here.
Uh-huh.
So this is the parent company here. And then I just select that. You get a blank window here. And then you play the audio in. So you have to hit transfer. And then you would play that audio and it would kind of track it into this window. That's it.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, gang.
I'm hesitant to recommend Melodyne because it's a slippery slope. But again, everybody has to make their own decisions with this. So I'll just leave it at that.
Well, join me all, if you would, in thanking our special guest, Brian Dokko, and talking about all this tonight, and Ian Brekke. So 2 last things as we close up tonight. We are going to keep these happy hours going all through the month of July and into August. So we hope you'll continue to join us. And thanks for those of you that tuned in on Facebook Live tonight or are watching the replay through our YouTube channel, the Vocal Jazz Academy. We do want to let you know the discussion is continuing tonight. Last week we had people hanging out in our rooms in the Facebook group for, I think, almost an hour and a half last night. So jump on the Vocal Jazz Academy Educator Support Group. And we have one room for college and university directors, one room for K-12 directors. And that's just unmoderated. Just come and talk and continue to have some fun. The second thing you saw, those of you that are group members saw on our page, that we are working on developing these anti-bias sessions for vocal jazz, specifically designed for vocal jazz directors, because we are teaching an African-American art form and we have students of all races and sizes and shapes in our group. So we actually have a former vocal jazz student who is trained in diversity training, and we are going to work on setting up this session. Is going to be a session that we pre-register for. There is going to be a small cost. We're not going to make it super expensive, but we do want to donate to an arts organization that is servicing low-income or needy students or racially diverse students, and we also want to honor the person who's going to be preparing the session for that. So please be watching for that in the next few days. I'm going to try to see if I can do a Facebook Live interview with him and get him to talk about what we're going to be doing in the next few days. So that's it for tonight. Thank you, Christine, Ian, Brian, Jessica, our administrative ninja. It's really, really, really good to see all of you. Thank you for coming tonight.